The massive chamber of the Galactic Council hummed with the quiet whispers of 200 species. Their voices created a gentle symphony of clicks, whistles, and words that echoed off the polished walls. High above, the artificial sky showed the slow dance of stars and distant galaxies, a reminder of the vastness they all shared. Ambassador James Miller stood at his podium, his gray suit sharp against the shimmering backdrop. He was tired. The council had been in session for 6 hours, discussing everything from trade routes to colonization rights. But now, as the final topic approached, he felt a familiar tension in his shoulders. Next on our agenda, announced High Counselor Brightcrest, his crystalline form catching the light, we will discuss the recent military exercises conducted in the Orion sector. Miller watched as holographic displays lit up around the chamber, showing recordings of Earth's latest space fleet maneuvers. The images showed hundreds of ships moving in perfect formation, their engines leaving trails of blue fire against the darkness of space. Most impressive, rumbled Council Member Stonevoice, his rocky features grinding together in what passed for a smile among his kind. The human fleet demonstrates remarkable precision. Yet again. Other council members nodded in agreement. Miller had seen this reaction before. They always admired human military capabilities, even if they didn't fully understand them. Then came the question that would change everything. "I have observed something peculiar about humans," said Representative Firstlight, her luminescent form pulsing gently as she spoke. She was young for a council member, barely 300 years old. They possess formidable military power. Their tactics are superior. Their weapons are advanced. Yet, she paused, her light dimming slightly. They seemed terrified of war. Why? The chamber fell silent. 200 species, all watching Miller, waiting for his answer. He could feel their curiosity, their confusion, and in some cases, their judgment. Miller took a deep breath. He looked down at his hands, remembering his grandfather's stories of the trenches, of mud and blood, and endless artillery fire. He thought of the history every human carried in their DNA, the memory of 1,000 conflicts etched into their very being. "You're right," he said finally, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "We are afraid of war. Very afraid." He looked up, meeting the gaze of various council members. "But I don't think you understand why." "Explain," commanded Brightcrest, leaning forward slightly. "How can a species so clearly designed for combat, so obviously capable of warfare, fear it so deeply?" Miller walked away from his podium, a move that caught everyone's attention. It wasn't strictly protocol, but he needed to move, to feel the weight of this moment in his steps. "Look at those ships," he said, gesturing to the holographic display. "Look at their precision, their power. Do you know why we built them that way?" He didn't wait for an answer. "Because we know exactly what they can do. We know exactly how many lives they can end. We know because we've done it before, to ourselves, countless times." He stopped in the center of the chamber, where the light from the artificial sky cast his shadow in all directions. "You see fear of war as weakness," he continued. "But I'm here to tell you that our fear is our strength. It's why we're still alive. It's why we're standing here today." The silence in the chamber deepened. Even the usual background hum of environmental systems seemed muted. "If you want to understand humans," Miller said, his voice growing softer, forcing them to lean in, to really listen, "if you want to understand why we are the way we are, then I need to tell you a story. A story about why the most dangerous species in the galaxy is also the one most dedicated to avoiding war." He looked up at the artificial sky, at the galaxies spinning slowly overhead. "Would you like to hear it?" The council members exchanged glances. Finally, Brightcrest spoke for them all. "We would, Ambassador Miller. Please, tell us why humans fear war." Miller nodded slowly. "Then let me tell you about Earth's history. Let me tell you about fire and death, and lessons written in blood. Let me tell you why every human child learns about peace before they ever learn about war. The chamber settled in for what would become one of the most important diplomatic sessions in galactic history. The truth about humanity's relationship with war was about to be revealed, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be quite the same. Miller touched a control on his wrist device, and the chamber's holographic displays changed. Gone were the impressive fleet formations. Instead, the council members saw images that made many of them shift uncomfortably in their seats. This, Miller said quietly, was called World War I. The images showed muddy trenches stretching to the horizon. Young men, barely more than children, stood in water up to their knees, their faces hollow with exhaustion. The next image showed a field of crosses, stretching as far as the eye could see. 9 million dead, Miller continued. And that was just the beginning. Bright Crest's crystalline form dimmed slightly. Beginning. The images changed again. Now they showed cities reduced to rubble, massive machines of war rolling through streets, and planes dropping destruction from above. World War II, just 20 years later. 50 million dead. Entire cities erased in moments. Miller's voice remained steady, but his hands were clenched at his sides. But even that wasn't what made us truly afraid. The next image made several council members gasp. A massive mushroom cloud rose into the sky, its terrible beauty reflected in the chamber's perfect acoustics. We called it the atomic bomb, Miller explained. For the first time in our history, we had created something that could end not just armies, but entire civilizations. First light's glow had dimmed to barely a flicker. But surely, after seeing such destruction, your species stopped. Miller shook his head. No. We built more. Thousands more. Each one hundreds of times more powerful than the first. We called it the Cold War, a time when two great powers held the entire world hostage with the threat of total destruction. The images now showed massive missile silos, submarines carrying enough weapons to end worlds, and the tired faces of leaders trying to prevent the unthinkable. For 40 years, every human on Earth lived knowing that any day, any moment, could be their last. Children practiced hiding under their desks at school, as if that would save them. Families built bunkers in their gardens. Scientists calculated how many times over we could destroy our own planet. Stone voice rumbled in confusion. But you survived. You didn't use these weapons. No, Miller agreed. We didn't. And that's the key point. We came to the edge of the abyss, looked down, and chose to step back. Not because we were weak, not because we couldn't fight, but because we finally understood what war had become. He changed the display one final time. Now it showed something that made several council members lean forward in curiosity. It was a simple stone wall with names carved on it. This is a war memorial, Miller explained. We built thousands of them, not to celebrate victory, but to remember the cost. Every name is someone who never came home. Someone's child, parent, friend. We force ourselves to look at these names, to remember what happens when we let war start. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the usual whispers had stopped. You asked why we're afraid of war. Miller's voice grew stronger. We're afraid because we know exactly what it can do. We've seen it. We've lived it. We've nearly ended ourselves with it. And yet, he straightened his shoulders, looking around the chamber. That fear made us stronger. It forced us to find other ways, to create institutions for peace, to develop diplomacy into an art form, to work harder at understanding each other than we ever worked at destroying each other. And when you reached the stars, asked Brightcrest, when you found you were not alone, we promised ourselves we would never let our children see what our ancestors saw, Miller replied. Yes, we maintain our fleets. Yes, we train our soldiers. But not because we want war. We do it because we know that the only thing more dangerous than being prepared for war is being unprepared for those who don't share our fear of it. First Light's glow had strengthened again. You're saying your fear is wisdom. Miller nodded slowly. The wisest of our warriors have a saying. Si vis pacem, parabellum. It means, if you want peace, prepare for war. But they always add something to that old phrase now. What do they add? Stone Voice asked. They say, if you want to keep peace, remember war. The council chamber's holographic displays shifted again, showing a new set of images. This time, they revealed humans in military uniforms, their chests decorated with medals and ribbons. But unlike the fierce warriors many species expected, these soldiers' eyes held something different, a deep, haunting wisdom. Let me introduce you to some of Earth's greatest warriors, Miller said, gesturing to the images. General Thomas Reed, Admiral Kate Stone, Commander William West. Each of them has led armies, commanded fleets, and won battles that shaped our world. He paused, letting the council members study the faces, and every single one of them has dedicated their lives to preventing war. First Light's glow pulsed with confusion. This seems contradictory. Perhaps, Miller acknowledged, but it's one of humanity's most important truths. Those who know war best want it least. The display changed to show a massive gathering. Thousands of human veterans, all wearing their old uniforms, standing in peaceful protest against a new conflict. This happened just 30 years ago, Miller explained. When some of our leaders were pushing for a war, it was our veterans who stood up and said no. They remembered what war really meant. They carried those memories in their minds, in their hearts, and sometimes in their bodies. Stone's voice shifted, his rocky form grinding slightly. But surely warriors live for battle. For the glory of combat? Miller shook his head. Let me show you something. The display changed again, showing a quiet room where soldiers sat in a circle, talking. Their faces were tired, their postures tense. This is what we call a therapy session, Miller continued. Many of our warriors need help dealing with their memories of combat. We have a condition called PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. It means the horrors of war stay with them, haunting their dreams, affecting their lives. Bright Crest's crystalline form sparkled with interest. They are damaged by their experiences, changed by them, Miller corrected gently. And those changes made us stronger as a species, because these warriors came home and taught us something vital, that being good at war doesn't mean you have to love it. The display shifted to show military training grounds, but not what the council expected. Instead of combat drills, they saw soldiers building bridges, delivering medical supplies, and helping communities recover from disasters. We learned to channel our military capabilities into other things, Miller explained. Our soldiers became peacekeepers. Our warships became rescue vessels. Our military technology was turned toward exploration and defense. First Light floated closer to the display. But you maintain your combat capabilities. Of course, Miller nodded, because we learned another truth. Peace isn't just the absence of war. Peace is something you have to work for, to maintain. Sometimes that means being strong enough to make war unthinkable for your enemies. The images changed one final time, showing a massive space station orbiting Earth. Its hull was painted with the words, "Peace through remembrance." This is our newest military academy, Miller said. Every cadet who trains here spends their first month studying war memorials, talking to veterans, and learning about the cost of conflict. Only then do they begin combat training. Why? Asked Stone Voice. Because we want them to understand what they're really training for, Miller replied. They're not learning to fight wars. They're learning to prevent them. And if prevention fails, they learn to end conflicts as quickly and decisively as possible. He turned to face the council directly. Our greatest warriors don't pray for war. They pray they'll never have to use their skills. They train not because they want to fight, but because they want to be so good at fighting that nobody dares to start a war with us. First Light's glow had brightened with understanding. So your military strength is a shield, not a sword, Miller finished. We build our forces strong enough to make any potential enemy stop and think, because we've learned that sometimes the best way to honor our fallen warriors is to ensure that no one else has to follow them. The council chamber fell quiet again, but this time it was a thoughtful silence. The paradox of humanity's warrior peacekeepers was beginning to make sense to them, but they had no idea that the real demonstration of this philosophy was about to unfold. Stone's voice rose from his seat, his rocky form towering over the other council members. "Ambassador Miller, I must confess something to you." His voice rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder. "We have been wrong about humans." Miller tilted his head slightly. "Wrong in what way?" "For generations, we thought your species was weak." Stone Voice's admission caused murmurs throughout the chamber. "We saw your reluctance to fight, your constant push for diplomatic solutions, your fear of war, and we mistook it for cowardice." First Light's glow pulsed in agreement. Many of us wondered how such a timid species had survived long enough to reach the stars. Miller couldn't help but smile slightly. It wasn't a happy smile, but one of understanding. "And now," Bright Crest's crystalline form sparkled as he spoke, "now we begin to understand that what we thought was weakness might be your greatest strength." He paused, his crystal surfaces reflecting the starlight from above. "But there is something we still don't understand." "What's that?" Miller asked. "Why do you remember?" First Light moved closer, her gentle glow illuminating the space between them. "Other species have had wars. Other species have known conflict, but they try to forget. They bury the memories. You humans, you build monuments to remember. You create art about your wars. You tell stories about them. Why?" Miller walked to the center of the chamber again. With a gesture, he brought up new images in the holographic display. They showed war museums, history books, and children visiting memorial sites. "We remember because forgetting is dangerous," he explained. "Those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. That's one of our oldest sayings." The display changed to show a classroom where young human children were learning about past wars. Some of the council members shifted uncomfortably at the sight. "You teach your young about such horrors?" Stone Voice seemed shocked. "Yes," Miller nodded. "Not to glorify war, but to help them understand its cost. We believe that knowledge of war's horror is the best vaccine against its outbreak." Bright Crest's crystalline form dimmed slightly, "Yet you maintain vast military forces." "That's where your misunderstanding runs deepest," Miller said. "You thought our fear of war meant we wouldn't fight. The truth is, our fear of war is precisely why we're always ready to fight." The chamber fell silent as the council members tried to process this apparent contradiction. "Let me explain something we call deterrence," Miller continued. "If you want to prevent a fire, you install sprinklers. If you want to prevent theft, you put up locks. And if you want to prevent war," he gestured to the image of Earth's defense fleet, "you make sure any potential aggressor knows the cost would be too high." First Light's glow brightened with sudden understanding. "So your military isn't for fighting wars. It's for preventing them," Miller finished. "By being so obviously capable of warfare, while simultaneously being so clearly reluctant to engage in it, we create a powerful message. Don't start a war with us. We don't want to fight. But if forced, we will finish it." Stone Voice rumbled thoughtfully. "This is why your ships are so visible. Why your military exercises are so public." "Exactly," Miller nodded. "Deterrence only works if others know your capabilities. We're not hiding our strength. We're displaying it, hoping we never have to use it." Bright Crest's form sparkled with new insight. "And this is why you join every peace conference, support every diplomatic initiative, while maintaining one of the strongest military forces in known space." "Now you're beginning to understand," Miller smiled. "We're not afraid of fighting. We're afraid of what happens when diplomacy fails. That fear keeps us working harder for peace than any other species in the galaxy." The council chamber buzzed with conversation as members discussed this new perspective. But their theoretical discussion was about to become very practical. Warning lights began flashing across the chamber's communication panels. Something was happening in the outer sectors. something that would put humanity's philosophy to the test. Red warning lights pulsed across the council chamber's communication panels. A holographic display appeared in the center of the room, showing a fleet of warships moving through the outer sectors. Their designs were aggressive, all sharp angles and weapon ports. The Ravagers, Stone voice rumbled. They're testing our borders again. Miller's wrist device buzzed. He checked it calmly, then looked up at the council. Not your borders, he said quietly. They're heading for Earth-controlled space. First Light's glow flickered anxiously. Will you fight them? No, Miller replied, surprising many council members. We're going to teach them. He touched his wrist device again. New holograms appeared, showing the Earth defense fleet moving into position. But they weren't taking battle formations. Instead, they were organizing into what looked like a training exercise. What are you doing? Brightcrest asked, his crystalline form shimmering with confusion. Implementing standard first contact deterrence protocol, Miller explained. He gestured, and a new figure appeared in hologram form beside him. Admiral Kate Stone, her uniform crisp and her expression calm. Council members, the Admiral nodded. You're about to witness how humans prefer to prevent wars rather than fight them. The displays showed the Ravager fleet approaching Earth's territory. They were moving fast, weapons charged, clearly expecting either weak resistance or a full battle. They got neither. Instead, the Earth fleet began what looked like a routine training exercise. But there was nothing routine about it. Ships moved in perfect formation, demonstrating complex maneuvers that required incredible skill. Fighters danced through asteroid fields, showing precision that made several council members gasp. We call this peaceful deterrence, Admiral Stone explained. We're not threatening them. We're not even acknowledging them as a threat. We're simply demonstrating what we can do. The Ravager fleet slowed its approach. Their sensors would be showing them everything. The precision of Earth's ships, the power of their engines, the accuracy of their targeting systems, all demonstrated without firing a single shot. Watch what happens next, Miller said softly. The Earth fleet began a new maneuver. It looked like a standard defense drill, but it positioned their ships in a formation that would perfectly counter the Ravagers' approach vector. Still, they fired no weapons. They made no aggressive moves. They simply demonstrated their capability to respond if needed. They're sending us a message, one of the Ravager commanders transmitted, their message intercepted and played in the council chamber. But they're not attacking. Why aren't they attacking? The Earth fleet continued their exercises, each maneuver showing a different aspect of their capabilities. Fighters demonstrated their agility. Capital ships showed their coordination. Support vessels revealed their speed and adaptability. Look at their formations. Another Ravager message came through. They could destroy our entire fleet, but they're just practicing. Miller smiled slightly. They're beginning to understand. The Ravager fleet's weapons powered down. Their aggressive approach slowed, then stopped completely. Finally, their commander sent a message directly to the council. We appear to have strayed from our assigned sectors. We will withdraw to correct this navigational error. The Earth fleet maintained their exercises, never acknowledging the Ravagers directly, as the would-be attackers turned and departed at high speed. Admiral Stone's hologram smiled. And that, council members, is how you win a battle without fighting. Remarkable, Stone voice rumbled. You defeated them by showing them why they shouldn't start a fight. Better to win their respect than their hatred, Miller added. They'll remember this. Next time, they might choose diplomacy first. First Light's glow had brightened considerably. You demonstrated not just your military power, but your restraint. The two must go together, Miller nodded. Power without restraint is dangerous. Restraint without power is vulnerable. But together, he gestured to the departing Ravager fleet. Together, they create peace. The council chamber was silent again, but this time it was a silence of deep understanding. They had just witnessed the perfect demonstration of humanity's philosophy. the warriors who were so good at war that they could afford to choose peace. As the holographic displays showed the Ravager fleet retreating into deep space, the council chamber erupted in excited discussion. Species that had never agreed on anything were now talking animatedly about what they had just witnessed. Stone Voice turned his rocky form toward Miller. "We saw your power," he rumbled thoughtfully. "But what strikes me most is what we didn't see." "Oh." Miller raised an eyebrow. No celebrations of victory. No taunts to the retreating enemy. No pride in your show of force. Stone Voice's grinding voice held a note of wonder. Just, quiet efficiency. First Light floated closer, her glow pulsing with curiosity. "It's as if you took no pleasure in proving your strength." "Why would we?" Miller asked softly. "Every show of force, even a peaceful one, is a reminder of what could happen if diplomacy fails. There's no joy in that, only necessity." Bright Crest's crystalline form sparkled as he joined the conversation. "You've made us see something we've missed for generations. When your ships protect trade routes, when your armies join peacekeeping missions, when your diplomats work tirelessly for peace, it's not because you're weak." "No," Miller agreed. "It's because we know exactly how strong we are, and that knowledge comes with responsibility." The holographic displays shifted again, showing scenes from Earth's history. But this time, they weren't scenes of war. Instead, they showed the first United Nations meeting, the signing of major peace treaties, international cooperation in space. "After our last great war," Miller explained, "something changed in humanity. We looked at our weapons, our armies, our capacity for destruction, and we made a choice. We chose to use our strength not for conquest, but for protection." First Light's glow brightened with sudden understanding. "Your fear of war, it united your people." Miller nodded. Nations that had fought for centuries came together. Old enemies became allies. We didn't forget our differences, but we learned to solve them without weapons. "But how?" Stone Voice asked. "How did you convince warriors to choose peace?" "We didn't have to convince them," Miller smiled. "They were the ones leading the change. Our greatest generals became our strongest advocates for peace. They transformed our military from a force of war into a shield for civilization." Bright Crest's facets caught the light as he turned to address the full council. "Members of the Galactic Council, I believe we must reconsider our understanding of strength." The chamber grew quiet, listening. "We have long measured power by the willingness to use it," Bright Crest continued. "But humans have shown us that true strength might lie in the wisdom to avoid using power unless absolutely necessary." First Light added her voice. "They've built one of the strongest military forces in known space, not to wage war, but to prevent it. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon exists not to fight, but to make fighting unnecessary. And when fighting becomes necessary," Stone Voice rumbled, "they use their strength with restraint, seeking to end conflicts quickly and decisively, always leaving room for peace to grow in war's aftermath." Miller watched the council members discuss this new understanding, seeing centuries of assumptions being reconsidered. He thought about all the human lives lost learning these lessons, all the hard-won wisdom paid for in blood and tears. "We have much to learn from humanity," Bright Crest announced. "Their fear of war isn't a weakness to be dismissed, but a wisdom to be studied." "Perhaps," First Light suggested, her glow steady and bright, "it's time we invited more human teachers to our military academies. Not to teach us how to fight, but to teach us when not to fight." The council chamber hummed with agreement. Species that had once looked down on humanity's reluctance to wage war were now seeing it in a new light. They were beginning to understand that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their weapons or their ships or their armies. It was in their determination to do everything possible to avoid using them. 6 months after the historic council session, Ambassador Miller stood in the newly constructed Galactic Peace Academy. The massive space station orbited a neutral star, its halls filled with representatives from every spacefaring species. Through the vast observation windows, He could see ships from different civilizations practicing joint maneuvers, learning to work together. Quite a change from 6 months ago, Admiral Stone said, walking up beside him. She was here to oversee the first joint training exercises between human forces and other species. Hard to believe it all started with a simple question about why humans fear war, Miller replied, watching a group of alien cadets listening intently to a human veteran sharing stories of Earth's history. First Light appeared, her gentle glow now familiar to both humans. The Council has officially adopted many of your diplomatic protocols, she announced, and the results are already showing. Conflicts between species have dropped by 40%. It's not just the protocols, Stone's voice rumbled as he joined them. His rocky form had been specially fitted with gravity adjusters so he could move through the station without damaging it. It's the understanding behind them, the wisdom in being prepared for war while working tirelessly for peace. The group watched as a holographic display in the main hall showed the latest achievement. The Ravagers, once known only for their aggression, had just signed their first peace treaty. They had requested human mediators for the negotiations. They remembered the lesson, Miller smiled. Sometimes the strongest message is the one you don't have to speak. Bright Crest's crystalline form sparkled as he approached. The Council has prepared a new declaration. We would like your opinion on it, Ambassador. The document appeared in holographic form before them. Its title read, Galactic Principles of Peaceful Deterrence, Inspired by Human Wisdom. Miller read through it carefully. The document outlined everything they had learned. The importance of maintaining strength while pursuing peace, the value of remembering history's lessons, the power of showing capability without aggression, and the wisdom found in fearing war's consequences. There's something else, First Light added, her glow brightening. We've begun building our own memorials, not to glorify past conflicts, but to remember why we work so hard to prevent new ones. Through another window, Miller could see the construction of the first Galactic War Memorial. Unlike traditional monuments, this one was dedicated not to victories or defeats, but to the shared commitment to peace. We finally understand, Stone's voice said quietly. Your species wasn't shaped by war itself, but by your determination to prevent it. Your fear isn't a weakness. It's the source of your greatest wisdom. Admiral Stone nodded. Fear teaches caution. Caution breeds wisdom. Wisdom leads to peace. And peace, Miller added, must be maintained through strength and vigilance. They watched as another group of ships began their joint exercises. Human vessels moved in perfect coordination with alien craft, each learning from the other, all working together to protect the peace they now shared. You know what the most remarkable thing is? First Light asked. Other species are starting to say they're afraid of war too. But now they say it with pride. Miller smiled. Because they've learned what we learned, that being afraid of war doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise. The station's artificial day began to dim, simulating evening. As the lights lowered, the stars became more visible through the windows. Somewhere out there, humanity's home planet continued its quiet spin through space, protected not just by its powerful fleet, but by a new understanding that had spread throughout the galaxy. Ambassador, Bright Crest said suddenly, the question that started all this, about humans being afraid of war. I don't think we ever got a direct answer. Miller looked out at the stars, at the ships moving peacefully through space, at the species working together who once might have fought each other. He thought about all the lessons learned, all the wisdom shared, all the peace preserved. Oh, but we did answer it, he said quietly. We're afraid of war precisely because we're strong enough not to need it. And now the galaxy understands that this isn't our weakness. He turned to face them all, representatives of 1,000 worlds, all learning to share humanity's most powerful insight. It's our greatest strength.